Intelligent plant design tools have been used in the plant engineering industry for many years now. Spec-driven models support productivity, improve accuracy, enhance coordination, and it allows engineers, designers, and drafters to extract many different types of engineering deliverables from a single source. It goes without saying that with all this information to manage, the role of a project administrator is critical to the success of a project. In my LinkedIn Learning course, I'll show you how to create, customize, and manage an intelligent plant project using the Plant 3D Administrator tools. Join me, Irene Radcliffe, in my course, AutoCAD Plant 3D Essential Training for Administrators. This course is designed to provide basic training for CAD managers and project administrators who will be using the AutoCAD Plant 3D software. You should already have a solid understanding of 3D AutoCAD and have the minimum design skills of a junior level piping or structural steel designer. Prerequisites for this course include AutoCAD Plant 3D Essential Training for Users, AutoCAD Plant 3D Essential Training Specs and Catalogs, AutoCAD P&ID Essential Training for Administrators, and AutoCAD P&ID Essential Training for Users. Please note that this course does not cover all the customization options available in Plant 3D, but it will cover the essentials to allow a new user to set up a basic project. Come on and let's go! If you have access to the exercise files for this course, you can download them to your desktop. These files have been structured so that there's one Plant 3D project for each chapter in the course for chapters 1 through 13. When we begin each chapter, we'll navigate to the Plant 3D project, and then when we begin each video, we'll navigate to the appropriate files within the project environment. Let's get started. Welcome to the Plant 3D Administrator Training course. As an administrator, you'll be responsible for all aspects of the project. These tasks include creating the custom components, the custom content, maintenance of all the project databases, upkeep of the project tool palettes, and preserving the integrity of the project data. All of this can be done using the Project Manager interface. This intuitive, easy-to-navigate interface is the brains behind the Plant 3D project. So let's start by talking a little bit about the administrator role and why this role is so important to the success of a project. So let's start with opening our software. So we're going to come to our desktop and launch our Plant 3D program. So we're going to navigate to our exercise file. So we have this organized as one project per chapter. So we're going to navigate to Open, Desktop Files, Exercise Files, Chapter 1, Project XML. And we're going to open a P&ID up just so that we have something on the ribbon menu here. So the most important aspects of the project is making sure that all the information is centralized and that it's always up to date. We don't ever want to have information duplicated on the off chance that one designer is using it, maybe perhaps an old version of a spec, and somebody else is using the new version of a spec. So same works with tool palettes. We want to make sure everybody's working with the same symbols, the same terminology, the same drawing borders, same notations. Everything needs to be compliant with your company and your client standards. So the best way to do this is only have a few people who have access to the project data. And this allows you to control the content, and it reduces the risk of having non-compliant data or drawing borders included with the company and client drafting standards. What you never want to do is make the core project files accessible to the majority of the users. So to do this, I would suggest have one or two people being responsible for creating the custom content, because this eliminates the duplication of work and it maintains the integrity of the project content. Restricted access to the project customization is vital to prevent others from making unauthorized changes to your project. So limiting access to the project data allows you to control the content. This reduces the risk of users creating non-standard blocks or using non-standard tagging schemes, and this risks putting you out of compliance with your company and client drafting standards. Let's take a look at the Project Setup dialog box. Every project is divided into 5 key areas. The first being the project details, P&ID settings, Plant 3D settings, isometric settings, and orthodrawing settings. In this lesson, we'll explore the interface to better understand what functionality can be found in each section. So to open project settings, we can do that in 2 ways. We can either come to the default project inside Project Manager and right-click, and we can come to Project Setup, or we can come to our project panel in the ribbon menu and open up our project setup right here. So here we are in our project setup, and I'm just going to close this down so you can see the 5 settings that we just discussed. So I'm just going to open each one of these. We'll go into these a little bit more detail further into the course, but just want to give you an idea of where the different functions are. So I'll start by looking at general settings. This is where we would come to set up our database. If you were working with SQLite, we're working locally. If you're working on bigger projects, obviously you would want to set that up using a full SQL Server database, and this is where you would do your setup and connections. If we have custom drawing properties, we would fix them here. Setting up custom file name format. This is where we find the path to all our default templates, where we store our drawing files, where we store our specs and symbol sheets. We have our project details. So again, this is just basic information that would apply to the entire project, such as the project number, the description. So again, customizable to suit either your own company or your client-specific information. This is where we would set up our out-of-the-box reports, which you can see here, our control valve. We can look at our line lists, and you'll see these are all modifiable. We can create our own content. We can modify existing. And if we're working with shared plant content, so this is if we look where we store our basic catalogs, our spec information, anything that's common to the entire project. So that, for example, specs, if you only want to update the specs once, you have them in a common location, and then everybody working on the project will always be working with the most up-to-date version of it. So again, this is something that starts off on your local drive, but you might want to move this to network folder just for continuity. So we'll take a look at the P&IDs. We can customize end connections for our P&ID symbols, our different line settings to just how we visualize the information on the page. If we're working with import-export, we can set some custom settings. Now again, we'll go into these features later in the course. We can customize Data Manager. Here's where we have our class information. So if we want to look at equipment, this is where we set up the custom data fields that we apply to both our P&ID and our 3D information. If we're working with inline assets, this is our valve tag information. So as we drill down through this, you can see that this is where all our data information comes from. We also have our P&ID painter, so we can go through and do some customizing on the P&ID colors. And we also have our P&ID specs. I'm just going to roll these up a little bit so we have some more room. Our Plant 3D is very similar to P&ID. We have import-export. We can customize Data Manager differently for 3D than we can for 2D. This is where we'd set up our layers and our colors. How do we want to show our piping in our model? By line number, by spec, by pipe size. Connection settings. What are the rules that we want to have around how our components connect to each other? Pipe bend settings and P&ID object mapping. So if we have custom symbols, how do we connect those symbols to our 2D symbols to our 3D symbols, so we can go through a mapping process for customization that we might be working on. Our class definitions, again, you'll see here this mirrors what we had in the P&ID. For example, our equipment, and here's all the data fields that we can have. We can customize the information that we apply to the different classes in our models. We have the same for steel. And we have spec update settings. So there's certain components that if they update in the spec, we can have those flagged so that we know there's been a change and we can go back and review that. So isometric, again, if we're setting up our isometrics, if we want to customize the output, we can see here we can go through and change our style setup. Again, how that information is exported and how it's displayed on the page, how we split the drawings, how we present our annotations, how do they look, what type of enclosures and leaders do we use. How do we dimension the ISOs? We can gather all these variables and attach them to theme. So we don't have to go around and change all these settings. We can set that up once and say this is a theme. We can apply this to system ISOs, to stress ISOs. So again, this is a way to do something once, set it up, and be able to recall it later on with minimum amount of effort. How do we show slope piping? How do we display our title block? And of course, when you're working with ISOs, if you're actually setting up an ISO title block or your basic templates, you might want to see what that looks like when it generates without having to generate the ISO every time. So we have a live preview. So if you're working on a customization, you can preview it in this window right here. Again, we'll go through that when we get to the ISO settings. And the ortho, again, very straightforward and simple. Title block and display. Where do we pull our title block information from? How do we show our line work? And where are we pulling our templates from? Now that we better understand the 5 distinct areas of the project and where we need to be to make the different changes to the project, we can move ahead and start to look at the functions in more detail. The most important aspect of using a smart plant design program is the flexibility that we have to customize the project in order to produce drawings and reports that are tailored to suit either our own company standards or your clients. Most of the work that you'll do will be contained in the Plant 3D class definitions. Let's take a quick overview of the out-of-the-box classes and take a look at the information that's contained in them. So first we'll navigate to our desktop, exercise files, Chapter 1, Project XML. So let's go to our project setup, and we're going to navigate down to our Plant 3D drawing settings, and we're going to highlight the Plant 3D class definitions. So let's take a look at what we have here. These are grouped out into 5 different areas, and if we click on the first one, the settings that you see here are all the data fields that are associated with our Plant 3D line group. So the information that you see here is always going to be line specific. So here you've got insulation, you've got tracing, you've got the spec, size, service, all related back to Plant 3D lines. But we also have additional information here with some physical properties too. We have the center of gravity and we have the weight. When we get into doing the piping and equipment, take a look at the hierarchy we have. When we look at the piping and equipment from this top node, and we go through here, you see that we have very general descriptions. Everything that you see here is applicable to all components that are included in piping and equipment. So take a look and see what you see here. And now we're going to just look at this list, and we're going to go down to equipment. And I want you to take a look and see the property names here. Some of these now have asterisks. So this means that all the components that you see with an asterisk are part of the hierarchy above, of the node above. So if we want to make changes, for example, if we're under equipment and we want to make changes to the manufacturer, we can't. We'd need to go up one level and make the changes at the root. So if we go back up to here, we see there's no asterisk in the manufacturer. So we can make changes to this data field at this level, but not this level. So as we scroll down here, you'll see all the same fields we saw previously with the asterisk. And then when we come down, you'll start to notice a few additional fields here. So when we're tagging equipment, we give them specific equipment tags, equipment numbers, equipment types. We can assign an area, an annotation style, and a tag format. But everything you see here is only applicable to equipment. Now I'm going to come in even further again. I'm going to look at the heat exchanger. Now, I want you to take a look at the fields. You'll see all the fields that we saw previously under piping and equipment with the asterisk. And then when we go down even further, you'll see the fields that we saw previously under equipment are now listed with an asterisk. So the number, the type, the area, these are all modifiable only at the next level up. The fields that are available to be modified under heat exchanger are only the ones that you see here. If we go to pump, let's notice the tags again. Only the parts that we see here. So the hierarchy, that's important to understand this hierarchy because it's a good way for you to know where you have to be to make modifications. If we look at pipe run components, it's the same thing. We have the family ID part or the part family ID. Again, all these have asterisks because they were all modifiable up at the piping and equipment level. As we scroll down through there, You'll notice that pipe run components have a little bit different information than we did with equipment. We're now asking for values that include tracing, insulation thickness, service. These are all the things that we associate with piping, but not with equipment. And again, if we come down a little further, these are all standard applying to all pipe run components. If we come down, for example, and look at the valve, you have the same components available, but we've also added additional fields that are specific only to valves. So we can make the valve modifications here because there's no asterisk. Again, pulled pipe, very specific parameters that we can add here. And the same hierarchy works for the structure. All the properties that you see here apply to all structural steel components. You'll see they now have an asterisk. When we go down one level, these are shown with an asterisk. And only the components that we have without the asterisk are specific to each of the nodes, the sub-nodes, I guess, that we have underneath steel structure. So it sounds a little bit confusing, but once we start to work through this, we'll go through some examples and we'll make some changes and some customizations, and you'll see how that works. But just to remember that the classes contain all the information about the components that we're going to be placing in our 3D models. If the component data field has an asterisk, it means that you have to go up one level in the hierarchy to make that modification. And we can add new properties as we go through the projects and add any amount of information that we want to any of these components that we want. So by adding fields to these classes, we can expand the amount of data that's associated with each piece of equipment or each piece of piping, and this gives us the ability to generate more comprehensive reports and tailored deliverables. Most of you, I'm sure, will be familiar with AutoCAD tool palettes. Tool palettes are used to organize your blocks and symbol libraries into manageable, easy-to-retrieve groups. Now, we do use tool palettes for the 3D piping symbols, but the tool palettes work in a slightly different way. Let's take a look at how dynamic tool palettes are used and see what makes them different from the regular tool palettes. So let's navigate to our exercise file. So we want to go to Desktop, Exercise File, Chapter 1, and Project XML. So the tool palettes that you see here are a little bit different. You see here we've named them out as being dynamic pipe specs. Now what this means is we're not actually building the tool palette the way you normally would do inside of regular AutoCAD, where you have the symbols stored somewhere on a network drive and you can just add and remove from the tool palettes. What we're looking at here are the symbols that are contained in your piping specs. So when you build a Plant 3D spec, when we load our project, the tool palette goes out to your piping spec, reads the components that are contained there, and uses those to populate the tool palette. If you want to create a custom component, you would do so in your spec. And then when you regenerate your spec, this component will become available inside your tool palette. So let's take a look at what we see here. Right now, the spec is being shown as being a CS300. Now, if you look up in your Home tab, in your piping menu, you'll see that we're looking at a C300 spec. I'm just going to change this to a CS150 and watch what happens to our tool palette. You'll see it has been updated and it's now showing all the components that you see here are based on a 150-pound spec. That tool palette is updated based on the spec that we're running our pipe with. So also take a look at our pipe supports. This is spec-based as well. We can create custom components for our pipe supports and have them added to the pipe spec automatically too. And in addition, we also have our instrumentation spec. Now this works exactly the same way as the pipe spec, it's just grouped different. If you create any custom instrumentation, you would do so in an instrumentation spec, and then all those symbols are available to be used once you reload that spec into the dynamic tool palette. So we also have one additional function in here is we have the ability to add a custom part. So even though I did say yes, we do need to have our components compiled in the spec. That's how we control and make sure we're only using approved fittings. But from time to time, you may need to make a custom part that's not actually in the spec, or maybe you don't have time to add it to the spec. So tool palettes make it much easier for us to find the components that we're looking for. Having a dynamic palette simplifies things again, because it means that any components that are added to the spec are automatically added to the palette. And all of these are pushed out to all the project drafters and engineers and designers at one time. Many of the symbols that are contained in your Planet 3D project are stored as blocks in the Proj Symbols Style DWG file. This file is critical to your project, and it must be controlled and backed up on a regular basis. Let's discuss this a little further. Let's navigate to our exercise files. We're going to go to our Open, Desktop, Exercise Files, Chapter 1, Project XML. Now, when we're working with the Planet 3D project, all of our blocks and 3D component information, valve tagging, ortho tagging, all these blocks and symbols that we use are all stored inside the Project Symbol Style DWG. So let's navigate out and take a look at this file, see where this resides in Windows. So you'll find this file under Desktop, Exercise Files, Chapter 1, and under the Chapter 1 root heading, if you scroll down, you'll find the Project Symbol Style DWG. Now, the name of this file is quite unusual, but it's imperative that you don't ever rename this file. This name is hard-coded into the coding of the program. So if you rename it, move it to a new folder, or delete it, you're going to break your project. So it's important that you understand the importance of this file. Now, I'm going to open it up and show you what's inside. So under Chapter 1, Project Symbol Style Drawing, you'll notice the drawing itself is absolutely empty. However, if we look at the blocks, you'll see that all the blocks we're going to use for annotation, for our P&ID symbols, are all stored in here. So we want to make sure we don't ever purge this drawing too. As we go through customization, if we need to add anything to our drawings, such as line types, line weights, we can add that information to the Project Symbol Style DWG. It's available to be used inside the other project blocks. So if you have a really good understanding of how AutoCAD blocks work, you'll have no problems figuring this program out. So let's just cancel out of that. And I'm going to go back to Windows and notice one thing. If I look through all our exercise files, Chapter 1 has the drawing. Chapter 3 has the drawing. Every project has the same drawing, and it's really, as an administrator, the thing you always want to do is to rename it to suit your project, because you're always, it's ingrained into us as AutoCAD users not to have duplicate file names. But just again, I just want to underscore that this file is critical to the project, and we have to fully understand its significance and its role in the project. It's also important that all members of the team understand this too, and make sure that they don't ever move this file, they never modify it, or they never delete it. Any changes made to this file should be made by nobody other than the project administrators. Now, you've seen that our project data is stored in the project location. We also have an alternate location to store data that's applicable only to the individual deliverables or drawings in our project. So we have to understand the difference between the project properties and the drawing properties, and where to find and modify each. Let's take a quick look. So let's open our project, Open, Desktop, Exercise Files, Chapter 1, Project XML. Now let's look at our project settings. I'm going to come down to our project details, and I want you to take a look at what we see here. All the items that you see are specific to the entire project. So regardless of what drawings or deliverables that we produce inside this project, they're all going to contain the same project description, the same project number. And we have custom properties, so the client information should be the same on all deliverables, and the project data. This is all specific to the entire project. So if I want to come and change the project description, all I do is add the project description here, and then any deliverables and any drawings throughout the entire project will update with the new description. We also have a different location for storing information about each individual file. And those we have in our drawing properties. So I'm going to cancel, and we're going to come and look at our Plant 3D drawings. I'm going to expand this node and look at 0106 piping. If we look at the properties here, you see we have additional database fields, but the database fields here are specific only to that one model. So in this case, whereas the drawing file itself is called 0106 piping, we know that quite often the drawing number and the title are very different. So the drawing number itself might be 1-6-PIP, and the title itself may be Chapter 1, Drawing Piping. And we could apply that this specific piping model is Area 100, and this is piping model. So this information is only relevant to that one deliverable. So that gives us a little bit of control. We can apply information on an individual basis or on a global basis. Now, when you have the ability to change a single value in the project data, and you have it automatically update all the files in your project, we save many man-hours in editing time, and we eliminate the possibility of missing updates in some of the drawings. And by having the ability to make the changes in the drawing properties, we can update title block information using the right-click and then edit properties, rather than have to go in and make changes to every title block of every deliverable. So both these methods are designed to save us a lot of time when it comes time to making changes in our project. Typically, when you look at AutoCAD properties, you see information such as color, layer, line type, line weight, etc. Plant 3D has added additional information to the components so that we can view and modify directly in the Properties dialog box. Let's take a look at the additional properties that have been added to your Plant 3D components. So let's go ahead and open our drawings, and we're going to look at 0107 piping. If you get this orphan fasteners detected, we can go ahead and just close that down. So I want you to take a look. I'm going to right-click, and we're going to look at properties. Now take a look at what we've got here. We're showing that we're looking at pipe, not a 3D solid. This is pipe. This is proprietary to the Plant 3D program. So the properties of pipe are different to an AutoCAD solid. So let's take a look and see. We're familiar with the general properties and the 3D visualization. What's new is we've added Plant 3D. We have class information, tagging information. And if I scroll down here, you'll see there is a ton of new information available through the properties of the component. So we can actually take a look at some of this data. We can modify this directly inside our properties manager. So I'm going to come down and let's take a look at the pump. So you'll see here it's showing an equipment. And again, this is proprietary. So here's your standard AutoCAD information. And from this point down, notice that the information is a little different than we saw with the pipe. This is actually asking us for equipment information, an equipment tag, the equipment class. And as we scroll down, the data fields are different too. It's asking us information that's specific to the equipment and more specifically to the pumps. Let's do the same again. Let's just look at a valve. We're going to right click, look at the properties of a valve, and you'll see that that's being shown as an inline asset. And again, let's scroll down and you'll see that the components are different. They're very specific components containing information about the valves that we have in our project. Having the ability to see all the data in the properties dialog box really helps us by giving the ability not only to view the data, but to modify it very quickly and very easily too. Knowing how to set up and use on-screen tools can speed up the design process a little by allowing you to see the component information from the line simply by hovering over it. You don't actually have to query the line and look at the properties. This is done simply by using the native AutoCAD rollover menus, and we're going to take a quick look to see how to set that up. We're going to open and hover over the line here. Now look at the information that we're seeing. We have layer, spec, size, tag, and line number tag. Let's go down and look at the pump. You'll see it has equipment and tag, And if we look at one of the valves, we see that we have the layer, the spec, the size, the valve tag, the line number, and the pressure class. So now I'm going to show you how we're going to change that. So we're going to come up to the Manage tab, and we're going to look at the user interface. Now we're going to scroll down till we see the quick properties and the rollover tooltips. In this case, we're going to grab the rollover tooltips, and we're going to come down and look at our piping. And I'm going to expand that out just a little bit. And you'll see here that under the general setting, we're choosing the long description. In this case, let's just change it to the short description, and we'll turn the long description on. And the same thing on the valve. We're going to take the long description off and turn the short description on. I'm going to apply and say OK. Now let's go back and roll over. And you'll see this time it's showing us the very last value is a short description, not the long description. And again, let's check with the valve. You're getting the short description of a globe valve. You're not getting the full long description. Having this information available from the rollovers saves us time by not having to click and then open the Properties dialog box to view each component. As an administrator, you can choose what information is displayed and make sure all the user's machines are set up accordingly. When we create a new project, we can use a couple of different methods depending on what type of project we want to create. We can create a brand new project out of the box, or create a new project based on an existing customized template. Let's start by creating a brand new out of the box project. So let's go into our project manager, and we're going to click on the down arrow here, and we're going to say select new project. In our project settings here, we're going to choose a name for our project, and we're going to call this Chapter 2. Now, I'm not going to give it an optional description just now, but you can. We're going to choose the directory where our project is going to be stored. So let's navigate to Desktop, Exercise Files, and say Open. So now we're going to go ahead and say Next. Decide the units you're going to work with, whether it's imperial or metric. But make sure you understand that once you set the project up and start working on it, you can't change it. You have to keep going forward with the units you choose. So make sure that's the first thing that you get signed off when the project's been approved, is which units it has to be executed in. So next, we're going to just use the defaults here. We get to choose where we want to store our P&ID drawings. I'm just going to default everything since this is out of the box. Again, I'm going to use the default locations to store my plant models, my specs, my orthos, and my supporting documents. And again, this can be modified once the project's set up. And in this case, we're going to use a SQL-like local database. If you were working on a large-scale project, this is where you would set up your SQL server and make all your connections. So now we're ready to open the project. This dialog box here, I should point out, just means once the project started, do you want to go in and start setting up the project information, making any edits to the project data? If yes, click that on. If no, just say Finish. So there's our project ready. So just touch on a few things here. Now that we're set up, let's look at our project details. The project name can't be changed from this point on. It needs to be saved. It remains as Chapter 02. And we can't change the units, but we can change any of the paths that we looked at that we set up. Many other things we can change, but we can't change the units. So it's important to note, once you've created the project using Imperial, you can't change it mid-project to metric and vice versa. So always make sure that your project manager has signed off on the units before you create the project. If you're working on multiple projects for multiple clients, you may want to look at creating a project template for each client. A template will include all the common information and customization that's required on each project, but you'll only have to set it up once. Let's use a template to set up a new project. So let's navigate to our desktop files. So we're going to open Desktop, Exercise File, and let's go to our Plant 3D template and select Project and Open. Now let's take a look and see what we have here. We have no deliverables, we have no drawings, P&IDs, or piping models. So let's quickly take a run through to our project details. Now, assuming we were going to be doing multiple projects for our client, who in this case happens to be LinkedIn, we can set up a template that contains all this basic information, and then the next project that we set up ports all this information over with it, so we don't have to go through and set this up again. So, for example, if we're working with project administrator, so we can have an admin training template, we can have multiple projects set up. And in this case, we have a project number with 123 ABC. With a template, you typically wouldn't have a project number in here. So I'm just going to remove that for now. And we'll say apply and OK. Now I'm going to create a brand new project. And I'm going to call this one Chapter 02A. This time we're going to come and use a template file. So we're going to ignore everything else. We're going to make sure we're in the right location. So we want to be in our desktop, exercise files. And this time we're going to copy settings from an existing project. So what we're going to do is we're going to highlight the copy settings. And we're going to browse out to our desktop. And we're going to look for our template file. So in this case, under exercise files, Plant 3D template, we're going to use the project XML from that template file. And we're going to go through exactly the same steps. But notice we don't have the option to choose units because we're using a template. It'll automatically use the units that the template was based on. I'm going to keep all the defaults for the different drawing locations. We're going to keep going with our SQLite, and we're going to finish. So now let's take a look at our project data. So let's come down to our project details and take a look and see. The project name has been changed to suit the one we've chosen. The description's the same. We have the training template, and all the information that we filled in here for LinkedIn, the client information, is all still the same. So templates provide a quick and easy way to port across all the customization that was done in the previous projects. It's important to note, however, that when you make any changes or improvements to your current project, you need to make the same changes in the template file so that they get incorporated into all new drawings and projects going forward. Welcome to Chapter 3, and we're going to take a look now at setting up your project. Now that we have a new project ready to go, let's take a look at what a default project folder structure looks like within Windows Explorer. As an administrator, you can customize this project structure to suit your company or client standards. Let's start by opening our windows. We're going to go to our desktop, exercise files, Chapter 3, and take a look at the settings we have here. What we want to do is look at the basic structure of the folders here. So what we have, equipment templates. This is where if you're creating an equipment library, for example, if you create custom equipment and you want to save that, we can save those to a template file, and we can use that customization, that custom piece of equipment over again from that template. So we can store that equipment template inside our project. Import-export settings. This is where the folder would reside with the customization for your import-export settings. Let's take a look at the isometrics. In the isometric folder, we have a number of subfolders in here, and each one of these represents an isometric style. So I'm just going to quickly go through here. We have a bolt mapping, our ISO S-key AutoCAD block map. Now, this is the file that translates what our 3D component translates into when we export it as an isometric symbol. We have an ISO symbol styles, which is a drawing that contains all our isometric blocks. And we have a Plant 3D ISO symbol styles. This is the same thing again. And we have the mapping, so the XML file that maps our 2D to 3D. So we're not going to take a look at any of these files at all. These are beyond what we want to get into for very basics for beginners. But let's take a look at the folders, however. Each one of these folders represents a different style of isometric. So for example, if you're creating a check ISO, let's take a look and see what we have inside. We have a configuration file, the ATR file, the ISO template, and the config file. So the ones of particular interest are the ISO template, because if we're creating an NCB check file, we want to be using a B-size border and have all our AutoCAD settings configured to look right in a B-size environment. So we would have a template drawing for that. And the ISO config is an XML file that just gives us additional programming. Some of the programming we can do at the project manager level, but if you have somebody who's very good with XML programming, additional changes can be made with this ISO config XML document. But again, I would not recommend this for anybody who's just starting out with this program, or even anybody who's an advanced administrator who doesn't have an XML programming background. So let's go back and check again. Let's take a look at our NCC. And the same files again. This will be our ISO AutoCAD template would be with our C-size drawing border. And again, if we look at our stress NCC, same files again, but these files are all going to produce a slightly different isometric. So our orthos, this is where we store our ortho drawings. Our DWG files are stored here. Any ortho cubes that we save, any views on an ortho that we want to save, we can go back to. This is where we would save these. And the styles. This is our ortho styles where we would create the custom files, our template files. All this information gets stored here. Our P&IDs, just the P&ID drawings are stored here. We have our plant 3D models. Again, just our plant 3D models, and we can create subfolders in here. We'll get into that a little bit more when we're setting up our project paths. Related files. Now, these are files that we can access from Project Manager. In the same manner, we can access our P&ID drawings and our 3D models. But this may be equipment lists, if we might have cut sheets, detailed drawings, anything like that it's not a CAD-based file, but we want to be able to hyperlink it to as part of our project. We can use the related file folder and have that hyperlinked into our Project Manager directory tree. Our report templates. This is where we keep the templates that we use when we get reports from Data Manager. And we have our spec sheets. So these are our project specs and catalogs that we're using. Again, we'll go into the location, the best places, best practices for where we store these files and where we map them to inside a large project and a small project environment. But out of the box, they come inside that spec sheets based inside your project folder. So the rest of the files we'll take a look at are just basic DCF files. These are our SQL Server files. So we have small database files for isometric, for miscellaneous, we have for our ortho, for our piping, for our power and process, P&ID. So we'll take a look at these again later. And our project symbol style drawing. So this is where this is a key, very key file inside your project. This always resides under the root project folder. And the other one is our project XML. Always must remain under our root project folder. So in this course, we won't get into customization of most of these files because that's really for advanced users and programmers. However, understanding where the files are and what they contribute to the project is extremely important, even just for a novice administrator. One of the advantages of using an intelligent plant design program is that we can control the location of our project files much better than we could using regular AutoCAD. This is because the drafters and designers could create files wherever they wanted. This made it difficult as an administrator to know if you were seeing the latest version of the drawing or if in fact you were actually seeing the only version of a drawing. With a project-based system, we can control exactly where all our drawings are created and stored. So let's navigate to our exercise file. Open, desktop, exercise file, project 3, project XML. So let's take a look at our project drawings here. I'm going to just pull my window out a little bit and take a look at our Plant 3D drawing. So if I locate 0305 equipment, we can see the location of the file down here. It's under Desktop, Exercise Files, Chapter 03, Plant 3D Models. So let's take a look at the project setup. So I'm going to come back to Project Manager and Project Setup. And under General Settings and Paths, under our Plant 3D, you can see the model directory that we are creating our files under is in fact just the regular Plant 3D Models folder. So we're going to just say cancel out of that. And I'm going to create a brand new drawing. So I'm going to call this drawing 0302 Piping. So notice it's created under the Plant 3D node. And if we look in Windows, let's go out to Desktop, Exercise Files, Chapter 3, Plant 3D Models, and you'll see we in fact have 0302 and 0305 in there. So now let's make a change to the path here. So we're going to go back to our Project Manager and Project Setup. I'm going to come down to Paths. Now I'm going to change our model folder. I'm going to come down to Navigate Out, Desktop, Exercise Files, Chapter 3, Plant 3D Models. But now I'm going to create a brand new folder. I'm going to call it New Location. And we're going to say Open and check that we actually have our new location showing there as our new default model directory. And I'm going to say OK. Now I'm going to create another drawing, a new drawing, 03, 02, piping 2. Now you can see when I create that in here, there's nothing really, I can see down here the file location, but as I look in the project folder in this pane, I don't really need to be concerned with where that drawing physically is located. As long as I can open it from here, that's the most important thing. So let's take a look back and we're going to check Windows. So we're going to Desktop, Exercise Files, Chapter 3, Plant 3D Model. And now if we look under a New Location folder, the drawing that we created is now under that location. So now if I change this back again, I'm just going to go back to my Plant 3D. I'm going to put this back to Plant 3D Models. Check that we're at Plant 3D Models right here. We're going to say OK. And we're going to create our next drawing, which is 03, 02. I'm going to call that Piping 3. And let's go back to check Windows, Desktop, Exercise Files, Chapter 3, Plant 3D Models. And you can see our 0302 Piping 3 is back to our original location. So let's just go back quickly and review our project's paths. So we can change all of these locations. You can see we can change these with this navigation button that we have. But I want you to come back down again to the very end, and we can look at the symbols and styles. So back to that proj symbol style.dwg that we've talked about previously. You notice this is the only file that we can't change the location. There's no button that allows us to repath that file. It's hard-coded into the program that the proj symbol style DWG is always located in the root chapter folder. So when we're working in a project that has multiple users, it's long been a struggle for the CAD admins to control the location of these project files. By defining the paths in the project setup, we remove the ability of the project team to create content in the wrong location. It also means that they can't move the drawings in or out of the wrong folders. One of the most important aspects of creating Plant 3D models and drawings is to make sure that you're creating the drawings based on either your company or your client's drawing standards. The easiest way to ensure this is to set up a drawing template where all the layers, line types, scales, title blocks are all predefined and have been checked for accuracy. Once the template has been created, we can set this as the default for each new drawing. We can set the location of the template in the project setup window like this. So we're going to navigate to Open, Desktop, Exercise Files, Chapter 3, Project XML. So let's take a look at our project setup. So under Project Paths, we're going to take a look at the PNID template. So you'll notice there's no project path per se. This is being relatively pathed to your C drive to the default AutoCAD template location. So let's take a look at where that resides. So I'm going to come down to our Windows and under C, Users. So under your own name, App Data, Local, Autodesk, Autodesk AutoCAD Plant 3D 2018, R22, ENU, Template. Now, this is a very difficult location to remember. It's buried inside your PC. And if you actually can't find the app data folder, it might be shown as hidden on your machine. So make sure that you've got all hidden folders shown and you can get that app data. So this is why it's a little bit difficult to have these templates located on your C drive. They're difficult to find. And if you make any changes to a template file, you have to make sure that that template file is updated on every single machine that's connected to this project. So what we're going to do is we're going to make it a little bit easier. I'm going to make a copy of one of these template files. We're going to move it inside our project, and then we're going to path it so that our project is choosing that particular option. So let's come down and look at our P&ID NCD color dependent plot styles. So I'm just going to right click and I'm going to copy that. I'm going to come back into our project, so our desktop, exercise files, chapter 3. Now I'm going to make a new folder in here. I'm just going to right click somewhere and make a new folder. And I'm just going to call it templates for now. I'm going to open that template folder and I'm going to paste that AutoCAD template file in this folder. So now what we're going to do is we're going to make a modification to this template. So I'm just going to exit out of this. I'm going to open a drawing file and I'm going to just navigate to my desktop, exercise files, chapter 3, templates. I'm going to change my file types to DWT for a template. Now notice, as soon as I do that, it takes me right back to that default location that's buried on my C drive. So I'm not sure why it's been set up this way. Unfortunately, we just have to work around that. For this exercise, we're going to go back to desktop, exercise files, chapter 3, templates, and we're going to choose our P&ID NCD color dependent template. Now I'm just going to open that. And you'll see here, this is just a standard P&ID title block out of the box. So we're going to make just a small change here. So let's take a look at the layers. And I'm going to just extend this out a little bit. And let's look at our title block layer. So I'm going to rename this title block layer to LinkedIn layer. And I'm going to change the color to 160. I do a regen all. And there's what my new template file is going to look like. So I'm going to go ahead and save this as a new name. I'm going to save as. Now notice it's taking me back to my template location. Unfortunately, we have to go through this process again. Exercise files, chapter 3, templates. And I'm going to call this one LinkedIn _ P&ID NCD color dependent plot styles. I'm going to say save. So now I'm going to exit out of this. I'm going to go back to my Windows folder. I should have deleted that original. Let me just go back and delete that from my templates. So I'm back to my desktop, exercise files, chapter 3 templates. And I'm going to remove this original one. We're only going to have one in here. We're going to keep the LinkedIn P&ID. So now let's create a brand new P&ID drawing. So I'm going to come into my Plant 3D admin, P&ID drawings. I'm going to right click and I'm going to create a new drawing. And I'm going to call this 0303 P&ID. Now notice we've got the original drawing with the original template. So now I'm going to come into Project Manager. I'm going to go to our project setup. I'm going to come to paths. Now this time I'm going to change the path for our P&ID drawing template. So I'm going to come out to navigate to our desktop, exercise files, chapter 3, templates. So this is the one we're going to use here is the LinkedIn P&ID. Notice that the name in here has been changed to the LinkedIn. We're going to go apply and OK. Now I'm going to just close this drawing down. And now we're past the new template. So I'm going to right click, create a new drawing, 0303 PID 2. Now note down here the drawing template. It's defaulted to the LinkedIn template that we set up. But notice we do have an additional option here. We can override that if we want to create a different template file. But for the most part, you want to keep this exactly as it is. So we're going to just stick with what we have here. We're going to use our basic default template. And I'm going to say OK. Now notice this time when it created the drawing with our new LinkedIn title block. So again, I'm going to push this back again. I'm going to come back down to our template. And notice that we're back into the original location again. So I'm just going to put it back to what it was before we started. We're going to start with the P&ID NCD. And we're going to create a new drawing. We're going to call this one 0303 PID3, and we're back to the original. So by setting up predefined project templates, you as the administrator can enforce the use of the correct template, making sure that all the standards that you've set up for your client drafting standard are always being met. We don't want to allow our designers and engineers and draftsmen to be able to modify the template files that we're using. And then if there are any changes to one of these template files, it gets implemented by the administrator on a global change by just changing that one file, update one file, and all those changes are pushed down throughout the project. Once your project's been set up, don't forget you can always go back and add more information. Information such as the project description, the number, client information, all this can be easily modified during the project lifecycle. As the projects develop, more information is usually gained. The project may be moving from a front-end design into a detailed design. Project numbers can change. So by having the ability to change this only once, saves a lot of time in updating deliverables because all the changes that we make in the project setup are pushed out to the drawing files too. So let's just review. We're going to go up to our project manager, project setup. So we've taken a look at changing some of the paths as we go. We can modify the paths. We've looked at some of our project details, but let's take a look at just again where we can go and update these changes. So I'm going to come up to the project description. I'm going to call this LinkedIn Learning Project. And I'm going to call this 123 ABC. Information such as the project data. For example, let's put the client information there. We can say this is LinkedIn Learning. Primary contact can be me. Project data. Let's take a look at some of the project data that we have in here. We can add things like an address. And the postal code is 93013. 93013. There we go. So there's many other things. We'll just say we can call the project manager is Linda from lynda.com. So anyway, these are just information data fields that we can fill in. And again, these can be customized. We'll look at this a little later in the lesson. But just to remember that when you are setting up your project, whatever you fill in here, we can set this up right at the beginning, but it's modifiable right through the life cycle of your project. By setting up data fields inside your drawing title blocks, we have data fields to store project information. We can save a lot of time by no longer having to locate and manually change attributes that reside in our drawing title blocks and reports. If the basic project information updates, we can just simply update it here and have those changes pushed through into our project files. Once you start to create pieces of equipment based on vendor information and specifications, you can save them as a template and use them over and over again, either in this project or any other project that you create going forward. Template files are created by default inside the project folder, and as the project administrator, you have the ability to determine the location of this folder, whether it's inside your project or mapped outside your project to a network location. So let's navigate to open our Plant 3D drawings. We're going to open 0305 equipment. Now I'm just going to unload our XREF here. I'm going to unload our structural steel XREF. And let's take a look at the vessels here. So we want to look for V307. And I'm going to just come up and make a modification by highlighting, coming up into my equipment panel and modify equipment. So we can see under this vessel 307, we have all the properties that we need, some filled out, some not. If you've gone and filled all these properties out, and these properties apply to this vessel, we can leave these in here, and these will be included as part of your template. When we look at the equipment side, we're looking at the geometry right here. And we can also see on this side, we've got the tag information and the general dimensions. So what I'm going to do is come down to templates. I'm going to save the current settings as a template. So the settings that we set up for V307, if we want to use these again, we don't have to remodel them. We can just take these settings and we're going to save as a template. Now it defaults to the equipment templates, which you can see are inside your Chapter 3 equipment template. just going to call it V307, and I'm going to save. So now let's take a look at a pump. We're going to do the same thing with a pump. I'm going to create a new piece of equipment. I'm going to look for a centrifugal pump here. Now, I'm going to make a couple of changes to this. Instead of this SL dimension, I'm going to make this to be 8 feet. And SB, I'm going to make that to be 24 inches. So just a few minor changes. And I'm going to come down to my templates. And again, I'm going to save this as a single template. And I'm going to call this our new pump. And I'm going to save. Now, if I want to come down and place these pieces of equipment, I can just come to my template and I can see here that I have my new pump shown. I can just choose that. It reloads all the changes that we made here. You can see the 8 feet by 2 feet. And I'm going to create. And if I drop that pump in there, you'll see it's got that extended base on it. So now let's do the same. Create equipment. This time we're going to go to template. We're going to take V307 again. Now I'm going to create that here and just drop that into my model, and it's using that template. So what we can also do is, I want to come down and look in Windows here. We're going to navigate to our desktop, exercise files, chapter 3, and inside our equipment template, I'm going to just create a couple of new folders here. I'm going to call this tanks, and I'm going to call this one pumps. Now I'm going to take our pump that we created and I'm going to drop that into the pumps folder. I'm going to take this vessel that we've got and I'm going to drop that into the tanks folder. So now when we come up to our equipment, I'm going to create. When we look at our templates, notice that's been organized for us. It's now reading that subdirectory. So if we want to place the pump, we can just come and put a new pump in. Notice that it's loaded with our 8 by 2 and we can place a new pump in our model. And again, we're going to come down and look at a new tank, V307, and we can place that in our model too. So I'm going to create one more here. I'm just going to take, let's take this one here. So whatever one we've got here, let's look at we'll take a modification on that one. And we're looking at TK307, but I'm not going to save it as 307. I'm going to give it a generic name. I'm going to come down to my template, and I'm going to save this as a current template inside my tanks. And I'm going to call this my LinkedIn tank. And I'm going to save that. And I'm going to say, okay. Now if I want to place that, again, templates. Notice it's placed it outside again because we haven't changed our default location. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cancel out of this. We're going to go to our folder, chapter 3, equipment templates. And I'm just going to take the LinkedIn tank here and I'm just going to manually just drop that in. Now, because we're pointing this to our equipment templates outside, what I'm going to do is come around to chapter 3. I'm going to take this entire folder, this equipment templates folder, and I'm going to cut that and I'm going to paste it into our exercise files. Now, I'm assuming that just if we assume that this is a network location, those equipment templates that we created by taking them outside the project environment and put them in a network location, these are now available for any user to use in any one of the chapters going forward. But we want to make sure that we actually path our project to this location. So let's jump back into our CAD. Now watch what happens if we try to create the equipment, templates. Now notice they're gone. So I'm going to cancel out of that. We're going to go up to Project Manager, Project Setup. And I'm going to come to our equipment template directory. I'm now going to repath that out. Outside our chapter, it's in our exercise files. From here, I'm going to say OK, apply. And now, when we go to create that equipment, you can see that it's pathed to that same location, and we now have our library back again. So using templates allows us to build libraries that we can use with every project we create from now on. Give some careful thought and consideration as to how you want to create your equipment template libraries and organize them accordingly. Whether it's by equipment type, by vendor, by client, by project, you decide. I would suggest, however, that you don't keep your equipment templates inside the project as they're only going to be available while this project's live. Keep them in a network location so that they're accessible to all designers on all projects all the time. Once a project's been created and all the customizations in place, it's a good practice to lock the project down so that others who are working in the project can't make modifications to your setup. Any changes that are made in error or without proper training could really impact your project in a negative way. We can prevent access by following these steps. So let's locate our project chapter 03 in Windows. So we'll go Desktop, Exercise Files, and let's open chapter 3. So we want to look for our project symbol style drawing. Now, we've talked about this file a few times through the lesson already, saying that we cannot rename, delete, modify, or purge this file. And the reason is this is the file that contains all the information about the project. Now, when we actually go in to make changes to our project manager, the first thing that happens is the project symbol style drawing is opened, allowing us to permit changes. If we right-click and change the properties to read-only, that effectively locks the project manager and won't allow changes to be made at the project admin level. So let me just illustrate that. I'm just going to pop into our CAD view. Now I'm going to come into Project Setup. Now notice what's happened as soon as we access the project setup. Let me move this out of the way and you'll see that the project symbol style drawing has opened inside AutoCAD. And as soon as we close that, it closes down. That's an integral part of the program, so the access to the project is directly linked to that drawing file. So I'm going to come back out into Windows. I'm going to locate the project symbol style drawing. I'm going to right-click this. I'm going to look at the properties. And I'm going to change this to read-only. I'm going to apply and OK. So now let's go back into our project. Now I'm going to try and change our project settings. Notice what it says down here. You don't have access to the project setup dialog box. That's because the project cannot open the project symbol style DWG. So locking down your project after it has been rolled out is the key to maintaining the integrity and security of your project. This is a simple lock, and you as the administrator knows how this works. Locking your project down after it's been rolled out is the key to maintaining the integrity and the security of your project. At the time of this recording, there exists a bug in the Plant 3D 2019 software that will affect some of the functionality that we'll discuss later in this chapter. In videos 3 and 4, I'll be referring to this functionality that no longer works as shown. I'll quickly review the issue with you so that when you come to these lessons and you find this issue, you'll know what to expect. In previous releases of the software, if a drawing had been moved in Windows but not the project, it would be illustrated with a small question mark on the corner of the drawing icon, which you see here. There's no question mark shown here, which in previous versions you would have seen that. Now when we go to open this drawing, we can see that the drawing no longer exists. So typically there should be a visual clue with a question mark to show you this drawing's missing. Now in addition, if I was to locate that drawing, I can right-click, and in previous versions I would use the Locate Drawing feature to browse out to Windows to find that drawing and reconnect it back with the project. But as you can see, with this bug, it's showing the Locate Drawing function as grayed out. So just be aware this bug has been logged with Autodesk. So if you get to that point in the chapter and you find things don't work for you, don't worry, you're not alone. Now let's make a start on chapter 4. We're going to look at managing your Plant 3D files. So let's go ahead and open our project. So we're going to navigate to Open, Desktop, Exercise Files, Chapter 4, Project XML. When we create our plant drawings, it's critical that we follow the correct procedures to ensure that all drawings and data are registered to the project. The folders that you see in Project Manager are what we call virtual folders, and these are used to organize your files visually and make it easier for the design team to locate the files they need. It's important to note that they may have different name or structure to those we set up in Windows, so let's look at this a little more closely. So let's take a look at the folders that we have in Project Manager. So we have a node for our P&IDs, and inside all the drawings we have would be listed here. also have our Plant 3D. So now what I want to do is under our Plant 3D, I'm going to go ahead and right click. I'm going to create a new folder and I'm going to call this Area 100. So now let's go into Windows, Desktop, Exercise Files, Chapter 4, and Plant 3D Models. And you see that it's set up the corresponding folder inside our Plant 3D models. So I'm going to minimize this window just a little bit. And we're going to go through and create a new drawing here. So I'm going to create the drawing in Area 100. I'm going to right click. I'm going to create a new drawing. And I'm going to call this 0401 underscore piping. Now notice that the folder path is modeling to the Area 100 folder. And we're going to say OK. Now, if you look at the tree, we can see we have the main Plant 3D drawings, we have the Area 100, and we have our 401 piping. Now, let's take a look at that in Windows. So here we have our Area 100. Now, if we right-click, you'll see that it has set up that 401 piping inside the correct folder. Now, I'm going to go back to our Area 100 here, and I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to create a new folder. And I'm going to call it piping. And I'm going to create a new folder and I'm going to call it equipment. So previously we made the folders inside Project Manager and the folders were carried through into Windows. Now we're creating the folder in Windows. We want to see if it carries back to our Project Manager and you'll see it doesn't. So now let's come back and set those folders up inside Project Manager. So under Area 100, I'm going to right click, I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call this one piping. I'm going to say OK. Now notice it already recognizes that we created a folder in there called piping, and it's asking me, do I want to not create this folder? Do I want to create it with a new name? Or do I want the folder in Project Manager to sync up with the one in Windows? So I'm going to go ahead and say yes, merge the existing folders. Now you notice I have my piping. And I'm going to do the same again, create a new folder. I'm going to right click. I'm going to create a new folder. And I'm going to call that equipment. And I'm going to merge that with the folder that we already have. So now if I come across and create a new drawing, it's created 401 equipment inside my Area 100 equipment. And now in Windows, you can see that our equip 401 equip is located in the right place in our folders in Windows. So having both the Project Manager and the Windows folder structure clearly defined before designers have access, it's always better to create a standard project look and feel, making it easier for designers to switch between projects. When a new designer comes into your project, you'll automatically be aware and familiar of the project structure. Renaming your drawings is very straightforward using Project Administrator, but there's a few rules we have to follow to make sure our files remain associated and connected with the current project. So let's take a look at Project Manager and open your P&ID drawing section. And you notice we have 0402 P&ID. Now I'm going to come along and I'm going to right click that. And I'm going to say rename this drawing. So I'm going to come and underscore and add an LI for LinkedIn on this. And I'm going to say OK. Now let's go to Windows and see if that change was made in Windows. So under Desktop, Exercise Files, Chapter 4, P&ID-WG, and you'll see that that file was renamed and it's now showing the LinkedIn suffix. So now let's try it the other way around. I'm going to right click and I'm going to rename this property. I'm going to rename this in Windows to go back to the original 402 P&ID. Now, if we try to open this here, the error says it cannot find the file. Please verify that the file exists. So I'm going to say OK. To locate this file, I can right click and I can locate the drawing. But you'll notice that it's still not going to connect up. This file must correspond with this file before it can be recognized. So I'm going to right click. I'm going to rename. I'm going to add the underscore li back to this file. And now that they're both named the same, I can select the name from here and say open. And you'll notice now the question mark's gone. If I double click, I can open that drawing again. So now the files are synced back with the project again. If I do want to rename this back, now I can do it, but I have to do it through Project Manager. So I'm going to come up and close the file down first. We can't rename the files that are open. I'm going to right click. I'm going to rename. And now I'm going to take off that LinkedIn designation, and we're back to having just 0402 P&ID. Now, the important lesson here to understand is that a drawing file is no longer an independent entity, and it's registered to the project database. Modifying that file outside the project parameters can create disconnects. All the data and equipment contained in that file is removed from the project as soon as we change the name, and it can no longer sync back with the database. This can lead to errors in the contents of your line lists and your materials reporting. This is a very key issue. Make sure that your drawings are always renamed or moved using Project Manager. Have you ever accidentally dragged and dropped a file into a different folder? Or had the project folder structure change right after the project was set up? Since all of our drawings and their locations are pathed into the project database, having a file moved in Windows means the file is no longer accessible through Project Manager. Let's take a look at how to relocate our missing files. So let's take a look in our project. Now we have a drawing of 401 piping, and we have this exists in our Area 100 folder. So let's go into Windows and make some changes in our folder structure. So we're going to Chapter 4, and let's look at our Plant 3D models. So we have our Area 100 here. Now I'm going to change and make a new project folder, and I'm going to call this Drag and Drop. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my Area 100 folder, which contains our equipment and piping, all the files that we see here. I'm going to accidentally drag this and drop it in there. Now that's very easily done in Windows. So if that happens, let's take a look at what we've got. So now let's try and open our 401 piping. It can't find that file. Let's go look at our equipment. Can't find that file either. So what do we actually want to do here? So let's go back and look at our drag and drop. Now I'm going to cut and I'm going to paste this back. That was done in error. So now let's look. If we double click and open that, you'll see that it was able to find the file. The question marks disappeared. And look again at the 401 piping. Open the file, question marks disappeared. So let's close these files down again. So now let's go back and assume maybe we made this change on purpose. So I'm going to go back to Windows. Now I'm going to take our drag and drop folder and delete that. And I'm going to come into Area 100. Now, let's say I took the 0401 piping, and I'm going to cut that, and I'm going to paste that outside Area 400. Maybe that one particular drawing was not area specific. It might have been some field piping, or so maybe we intentionally need to have that located in the Plant 3D Models folder. So let's come down to our project. Notice it can't find it. So all we have to do to repath that to outside the Area 100 folder is I'm going to locate the drawing, Desktop, Exercise Files, Chapter 4, Plant 3D Models, and I'm going to locate it as it is in the Plant 3D Models folder, and I'm going to open. So notice now the question mark's gone. And I can take this and drag it inside just the Plant 3D drawings so that now sits outside Area 100, and it matches the same folder structures we have in Windows. Now if I go ahead and open that drawing, you can see we have no issues. So if you have to move files using Windows, always remember to circle back around again and make sure that the new file paths have been updated in Project Manager. If you forget how to do this, the file won't be available to be opened inside Project Manager. And effectively, all the data contained in that drawing, all the tag data, piping data, P&ID data, is effectively removed from your project until you link them back up again. During the design phase, project files, folders, and general organization may change from time to time. Adding a new process train, perhaps the addition of new equipment, upgrading the existing equipment, all of this creates instances where file reorganization is required. As an administrator, it will be up to you to make sure that all the files are moved and organized without losing any project data. Let's take some existing files and relocate them to other places in the project. So let's start with our project Plant 3D drawings. So in the last video, we created our Area 100, and inside this Area 100, we have our equipment and piping, and then we moved our piping drawing outside of the piping folder. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this drawing back inside that folder now. So I'm just going to take this 0401 drawing. I'm going to drag it inside the piping folder so that we have our equipment and our piping inside Area 100. So again, we're going to open that drawing. We're going to check, make sure that it went into the right location. Desktop, exercise files, Chapter 4, Plant 3D models, Area 100, and we have our piping in the right location. So I'm going to close this file down now. Now, what I'm going to do is under this Plant 3D drawings, I'm going to create another folder. I'm going to call it Area 200 and another one called Area 300. Assume that we're going to make two different trains. So assuming we've got one process train and we're going to duplicate that to another train. So let's right click. I'm going to create a new folder. And I'm going to call Train 1, Plant A, and a new folder for Train 2, which I will call Plant B. Now, I'm going to take the area folders that you see here, and I want these to be organized inside Plant A. So that we have Plant A Area 100, 200, 300. And if we look under here, we have equipment and piping. So I want to duplicate this, but I want to duplicate it under Plant B. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down to Windows. I'm going to look at our area models here. Now you can see they're not quite organized the way they are in Project Manager. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag these three areas and I'm going to put them into Plant A. Now if we look, we have Area 100 and inside we have equipment and piping. And in Windows, we have equipment and piping. So now I'm going to duplicate these folders. So what I can actually do is I'm going to copy these three folders. I'm going to right click and I'm going to copy. I'm going to go back into my 3D models. I'm going to go into Plant B and I'm going to paste these folders. So now we have to sync these up here. We have to rename our drawings to something different before we can bring them into our project. So I'm going to go ahead and come into our equipment drawing and I'm going to rename this one _B. I'm going to go back again to our piping drawing. I'm going to rename this one _B. So now let's bring in these new files into our project. So under our Plant B, I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call it Area 100. Now, we already created that folder, so I'm just going to merge this folder. I'm going to do the same again with Area 200. I'm going to merge this folder, and I'm going to create Area 300. And merge this folder. So now we're starting to look the same. We have our Plant A, if we roll this up, with Area 100, 200, 300, and we have Plant B with Area 100, 200, 300. Now, inside Area 100, we have two additional folders, equipment and piping. So I'm going to duplicate these again. We're going to call Equipment. Under Plant B, Area 100, I'm going to say OK, and we're going to merge that existing folder. And we're going to create a new folder for our piping. And we're going to merge that folder too. So now our folders look identical. What we are missing though is the drawings that are inside. So to create the duplicate train, I'm going to copy the other files and bring them into our Area 1. So I'm going to come into Equipment. I'm going to right click And I'm going to copy the drawing to the project. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll out to Chapter 4, Plant 3D Models. Now we're looking for Plant B, Area 100. And inside our Equipment folder, you see the drawing that we renamed to be Equipment B. So I'm going to highlight that, and I'm going to import that into our project. I'm going to repeat that step for piping. Wrong button. I'm going to just copy the drawing to project. I'm going to go out. I'm going to make sure that I'm in Plant B, Area 100, Piping, and I'm going to bring the piping drawing in too. So now you can see that all of our files are organized the same way. We've created some new folders, we've moved some files, we've copied some files and brought the copies in. And now if we look at our Windows files, so under Desktop, Exercise Files, Chapter 4, Plant 3D Models, we should have an identical set of files in here. We have Equipment B, Piping B. I'm going to come back to Plant 3D Models and let's look at our A. So to differentiate A and B and keep these two identical sets of drawings, what I'm going to do is come over into my Area 100. And notice that our files are not synced up here. So let's take a look and see where our actual folders are looking. So we can come down and drag this file across. Let's look at the size here. So we're looking under Plant 3D, Area 100. So we're missing Plant A. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look here. You can see Plant A. I'm going to come down to the Area 100 folder. I'm going to right click and I'm going to look at the properties. Now I'm going to come under the folder path. I'm going to modify the path to Plant A, Area 100. And you'll now see we've had the addition of Plant A into that folder. So now if I want to come and look at my equipment, you can see it's still missing because we have to incorporate Plant A into this folder as well. So I'm going to come down to my equipment. I'm going to right click. I'm going to look at the properties. I'm going to manually modify this folder path to include Plant A. So I'm going to click on the browse. And here's Plant A, Area 100, and I'm going to choose my equipment. So now you see the inclusion of Plant A, Area 100 equipment. Now let's see if we can find our drawing. We have to locate again. We're going to relocate our drawing. It's going to be Desktop, Exercise Files, Chapter 4, Plant 3D Models, Plant A, Area 100, Equipment, and there's the new location of our drawing. So you'll see our drawings now synced back up. I'm going to repeat this for piping. You'll see there's no Plant 100 or Plant A, so we're going to change that. We're going to go out. We're going to go to Desktop, Exercise Files, Chapter 4, Plant 3D, Plant A, Area 100, Piping. And we're just going to relocate our file now. Locate Drawing, Desktop, Exercise Files, Chapter 4, Plant 3D Models, Plant A, Area 100, Piping, and our piping drawing. So now our drawings are all synced up. They're in the new location inside of Project Manager. And if we open that file, we're linked back up to the database again. We can go ahead and open 0401 piping. And let's go down and do the same thing. 0401 equipment _ B and 0401 piping _ B. So let's take a look at our folders in Windows. So again, we're going to go to Desktop, Exercise Files, Chapter 4, Models, and look at our files, Area 100, Equipment, and Piping. Plant B, Area 100, Equipment, and Piping. Now, if we want to go one more step further, I would like to close these down. And I'm going to rename Train A drawings to have Train A just for consistency. So I'm going to use the rename. And I'm going to come down to equipment underscore A. And I'm going to rename this to equipment piping underscore A. So now you see we've used all the tools in our toolbox here to realign our drawings. So all the Planet 3D files can be moved in Windows very easily. They can be renamed and reorganized, but it's critical that you update the paths in Project Manager right away and make sure that when you've done reorganizing your files, that all the files are named accordingly, they're grouped accordingly, and all the files are accessible to the project personnel via the Project Manager. When we're using Planet 3D, we have the option to add information to our drawing files that can be used to generate drawing lists and populate our title blocks. So now that we've reorganized all our files in our project, let's take a look at how to add some additional data to our drawing files and discuss the benefits of using this method to update our title blocks over traditional methods. So let's go into our Planet 3D drawings and take a look at the files that we created here. So let's take a look at our equipment, 0401 equipment underscore A. Now I'm going to right click and I'm going to look at the properties. Now you can see the drawing title is still showing 0401 equipment. So I'm going to modify that and add A. So that's just the title. If I want to change the number to something different, I could change it to 0401-EQ- plant _ A. So that could be the way the drawings are numbered. Now, quite often the title, the number, and the file number are different. Now, I have an area assigned here, so I'm actually going to call this area 100, and I'm going to give an author for that one. So we're going to leave that as is. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just, to make it easier, I'm going to right click and I'm going to copy the values that we have here. And I'm going to apply these to the same drawing file down here. I'm going to paste that in. Only this time, I'm going to call this one underscore A. And instead of EQ, I'm going to call this PIP. I'm going to add the drawing area 100 and my name as the author. I'm going to go ahead and do the same for down here. I'm going to look at the properties. This time, I'm going to call it B underscore B. So I guess we can call this equipment with a big B. And the drawing area this time, I'm going to call this area 100 again. And author. Now here's a thought. Let's call this plant B P&ID. So differentiate this between this file and the ones in area 100 for the other section. So let's change the other one too. And say OK. And we'll look at the properties. I'm going to call this piping underscore B, drawing area 100, author. And we're going to call this plant B PID. Now, is that what I called the last one? Let's double check. Plant B P&ID. Awesome. So let's go back and change the other ones too. We'll just add that notation here too. And we'll call this plant A P&ID. And we'll also call this one plant A P&ID. So now that we have all this information, let's just look at the properties here. When we're filling out our title block, now we typically would have a spot for a drawing number, a drawing title, a drawing area, a drawn by, and quite often a description. So by filling all the information out in this properties dialog box, I saved myself the time of having to open each file, go in, double click, update the title block, change the attribute, save, open the next drawing, edit the title block, update the attributes, close down. So you can see how quickly this was, I was able to accomplish this just with 4 files. Now you can imagine how quick that would be if you had a whole project's worth that you had to update. And each of these drawing properties is actually a data field that we can use to populate our title block, so that the actual attributes aren't in the title block themselves. It's a data field in the title block. And whatever value I put into the drawing properties gets pushed into the title block. So, and again, these drawing properties that you see are out of the box. So we can add anything we like to that. We can have a drawn by, checked by, revision, any information that you want to see on a drawing, we can have it added to the drawing properties by using the project manager when we customize. So by making use of these custom drawing properties that are created by the project administrator, we can add a lot of information directly from Project Manager without having to spend time opening each drawing and updating each title block manually. Welcome to Chapter 5, Custom Properties. So let's navigate to our exercise files. So we're going to open, our Project Manager, open, Desktop, Exercise Files, Chapter 5, Project XML. Now, when we're working in a project environment, there's a certain identifying information that we will likely want to see on every drawing and deliverable in the project, such as the plant number, the project number. And by storing that information in data fields, we have the ability to push the data into our drawing title blocks. This also allows us to change the data in a single location and have it automatically update the information in every project drawing, saving many hours of manual title block updates. So let's look at Project Manager and let's see our project details. So from Project Manager, Project Setup. So let's look at our project details. Now, we have certain project information such as the description and the project number. Now, we've looked at those before, but if we come down to this custom properties, you'll notice we have some information we can fill in here. For example, if we want to look at the project data, we have some fields here that allow us to put an address, postal code, telephone for the project client, I would think. And under the client information, we can put the company name and the primary contact. So we can add additional information. We can add as much information as we like and customize it absolutely any way we like. So let's look, for example, if we wanted to add a new category for the plant information. So what I'm going to do is come down to custom categories, and I'm going to say add, and I'm going to type in plant information. So now you see here we have project data, client information, plant information. So now that we have our category, we can come down and add a row. Let's just add a couple of rows here. So let's just do a plant number. And we'll also add a plant manager field. And we'll also add one more. Let's do main office phone. So now all of these additional data fields, the values that we put in here, we can take these and drop these onto our title blocks. So for example, if we're creating ISOs, maybe we have multiple plants inside a single facility, we can now add a plant number data field to our drawings. So let's just go ahead and put something in here. So we'll call it plant number, we'll call it 100. Plant manager, we'll call it me. And for our phone number, we'll call it 555-1234. So this information is now available inside our project. So we look under the custom categories, project data. We have client information, we have plant information. It's important to organize this in a way that makes sense. Having the ability to create custom project fields in our database means that it's easy to update the entire project's worth of drawings if any of the project information changes. Using these custom properties can save a lot of updating and checking throughout the duration of your project. When we created our custom project properties, the information that we applied in those data fields were common to all the project deliverables. Now, while this works on a project-wide level, we still have certain data fields that must only apply to each individual drawing. We can create custom drawing properties in the same way that we created the custom project properties, but these data fields will only be used to populate data relevant to the individual drawing or title block. So let's create a few custom drawing fields now. So let's go ahead and open our P&ID drawings and open 0502 P&ID. So let's review the drawing properties. So you can see we have a drawing number, a drawing title, area, author, and description. We're going to add a new custom property to this. For example, if we want to add a drawn by, checked by, or approved by, which are all pretty standard for any kind of drawing deliverables to have this in your title block, let's go ahead and create a custom property for that rather than double-click the title block and enter attributes for every drawing, we'll do it at the project properties level and see if we can speed the process up a little. So let's go ahead into Project Manager, and we're going to open our project setup. So let's take a look at the custom drawing properties. Now this works the same way as it did with the project. So we're going to come down and we're going to add a new category, and we're going to call this Drawing Information. So that's going to be our category. So now let's go ahead and add a new row. And we're going to call that Drawn By. We're going to add another one. Add Checked. And another one. Approved By. So now let's go ahead and do one more. So we're going to add one more category. And we're going to call this one Video Information. So in this case, let's add a row. And we'll call this one Chapter. And an additional row for Video. So now let's go ahead and we'll approve that, apply and OK. Now we'll go ahead and look at our P&ID drawings. So let's recheck our properties. So you notice the properties are a little bit different now. If I pull this down a little bit, we can see all the information that we just added. It's now available to be selected and completed inside the drawing properties. So for example, let's go ahead and call this drawing something different. Perhaps we actually want to call this drawing 502-PID. Let's do a dash. LinkedIn. So that's actually going to be our drawing number. And for drawing area, we can call this Drawing Area 100 and description, LinkedIn P&ID. So for information, we can have Drawn By, Checked By, Approved By. And for chapter, we're in Chapter 05 and we're in Video 02. So now we can go ahead and save that. So now those fields are all available for us to enter into our title block or into our reports or drawing lists. By having the ability to create custom drawing fields in our database, we can push as much information into our title blocks as we want.